All right, so now we're going to go ahead with this video. We're going to dive into the Forge multi-layered sampler. I'm going to give you basically a step-by-step guide on how to use this. If you have been using Forge, or if you're, just basically want to make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into when you go to purchase it, or you are using it. Just because it is a little quirky, it has some dependencies on just the way that the Reaktor works with samplers. So if you're not familiar with the Reaktor sampler, it can be just a little bit confusing, and there's some really annoying preferences sometimes you have to tweak and make sure of that everything's working properly as far as Reaktor goes. So let's jump in here. My multi-sampler layer, let's just quick tour, all right? Very important. So solo and mute buttons, I don't think I need to explain what those are. You got a volume slider, also very straightforward. Now less straightforward, just because there really wasn't any room to properly label them. It is referenced in the manual, so if you need to quickly review what some of these buttons are, you can go to the manual for it. I did think at least that much ahead to provide a user manual. So the button all the way furthest to the left, these are randomization safing buttons, for lack of a better term. So that means if you turn that switch on, when you hit the randomization key, other layers will randomize, but this one where this is turned on, this will not randomize. So that's pretty useful, because maybe you want some of them to randomize, maybe not others. Think of a million reasons why you might want to do that. Now also, underneath the solo button, this is a volume randomization safe. So if you have volume randomization turned on, let's just hear. I'm going to solo this just to make it easier. All right. So we're hearing a significant amount of volume randomization there. Now with the safe on, it's just going to lock it in where it is. All right. So again, fairly straightforward. It's just a volume randomization safe. Mute randomization safe is the button right underneath the mute button right here. So very similar to the other safing buttons. So when randomized mutes is turned on in the master section, hitting your trigger button will not mute whatever track has that on. Okay, so that's the only thing kind of frustrating is with the randomized mutes. When you turn it off, you're going to have to go and double click the mutes to turn them back off. In the middle here, you can delay the sample playback essentially with this slider. If you double click on the layer itself, it'll open up the sampler where you can actually load in your samples, which I'll show you in a second. And then on the far right, you have a little knob. Unfortunately, there wasn't really a cleaner way to do this, and there are reasons why you may want to change this value. So I did leave it in as a knob instead of just having a static system, or a system that would change based on how many samples you drag in. So basically, however many samples you load into each layer, you're going to increase the value here. So if you have 15 samples in this layer, you're going to put the slider to 15. If you do anything less, it's only going to randomize however many you select out of how many are there. If you do more, you're going to end up randomizing, and occasionally you will hit an empty layer. So it'll just almost be equivalent to randomizing the mute system. So there just wouldn't be a sample present there. So always, as a general rule, always match the sample range to how many samples you have loaded in that layer. It's probably what I would say, just to be safe. All right, so down here, this isn't really anything in terms of the interface that you need to mess with. It's just showing you, the waveform. It's nice that it's there. Just kind of, it's more cool than anything else. I don't know how functional it really is, to be totally honest. But let's show you how to load samples. Okay, this is very important. So I want to put an emphasis on this portion of it. And if you do have questions about how any of this works, you can always contact me, and I'll try and go through it and walk through it with you, just so that you're comfortable. So first thing, you need to go into edit mode in Reaktor for you actually to be able to change everything that you're going to need to change. So you don't want to stay in edit mode all the time, because you could risk accidentally changing something about the ensemble. But for now, we do want to, right? So you go to edit mode, and you can even see, so look when I change edit mode. So when you turn it on, you get a whole lot more options about the samples that are in that layer, okay? Now, of course, I already have samples in 3 of these layers. So let me go to this layer. There's nothing in here. I'm going to show you what you need to do. So first thing, most important thing, because if you don't have this set right, and this is a Reaktor setting, so if this is set weird, you're just going to have a big headache, and you're going to be like wondering why no samples are triggering. So going over here, this little gear settings wheel, you want to make sure, let me see, where it says ignore root note on file load, you want to make sure that's checked. Otherwise, every sample you load, you'd have to manually go in and choose a root and then a low and high note. And you don't want to do that, because it's going to be way more time consuming than it needs to be. So just make sure that's checked. In terms of actually loading the samples in, pretty easy. All you got to do is go to your samples, and you drag and drop them in. You can drag and drop them in directly into the right side of the sampler here, but I like to do it into the list, because you have it's less confusing without consulting the manual as to what's going on, just to put it simply. So let me find, let's do, I don't know, negative. Let's do the negative samples. Okay, so I'll just grab like 5 of these arbitrarily, drag and drop them in. All right, now, first thing, the embed button here. If you want these samples to live inside the ensemble, when you save the ensemble, you have to embed them, okay? You can load in and save sample maps. So if you come up with like a map of samples that you really like, you can save them here, or export including audio data, or export with references only. You can also import sample maps. So good time to mention all of the sound libraries that I produce, at least for the past, roughly a year. I include sample maps with my sample libraries just as an added bonus, because having to do some of this is a little time consuming. So just one small thing that I figured would be nice. Now, here's the only other thing you have to change in here before you're ready to go, is you're probably going to want to change the root note. So that way, all the samples are going to play back at the original pitch that they exist as. So you have to change these manually to 0. Unfortunately, there's not really a way of doing that any quicker, as far as I've been able to find out. And I've dug pretty deep into that problem, and I just can't find anything to make it easier. You don't want to change these low and high notes. Basically, these are when you're randomizing, when the engine is picking a sample, it's based off of these numbers. So if all these numbers were the same, or you didn't have these numbers, the L and H values, then there's no randomization happening. So you just need to change the root, leave the low and high alone. And you actually, changing the root could even be optional. If you don't care that the sample plays back at the original pitch or not, then you could just go to town with it as it is. All right, so I got some samples in there. Let's play around with this stuff a little bit. So probably that should cover most of the explanation of the sampler load in. So the rest will just kind of be probably screwing around and making some cool sounds. Whatever sounds I print down in this video, I'll probably make available for download. So if you like something you hear, I'll put a download link there. You can just grab it. I'm not going to do any metadata tagging or anything formal. It's just going to be the stereo output, just literally the file that gets recorded into the DAW here. That's what you'll get. So let me turn off edit mode. and get this cleaned up, this interface cleaned up, and start recording. Okay. I'm just going to play around a little bit. So put this stuff on moderately. Oh, so here, see, I didn't, because I was screwing around with all the knobs, I didn't adhere my own advice. So here you can see this top layer, nothing is loaded in there currently. So I gotta put that back to 5. And then this layer should also be 5, which I didn't do. All right, so when I hit random, the random button, that's gonna shuffle my samples. And then trigger is actually gonna randomize the effects. Still have to adjust that knob. Okay, now that I got everything moderately set up, I'll try to allow some timing in between these, just so that if you want to use them, you can. Little volume, or not volume, pitch automation, or manual pitch automation. All right, let's start screwing out with these a little bit more. Okay, and let's turn the glide on. You know, something I'm noticing here, just looking at the screen, I see these little yellow boxes around the parameters. Usually those aren't going to be there. It's kind of a Reaktor bug. So I don't know why those yellow boxes are there right now. Not that this interface is really anything to be impressed by. I tried to make it functional and as clearly laid out as possible, but beyond that, I am not a UI designer. That was a really cool one, actually. Really cool. All right. What are we at here? We're at like 15 minutes. Okay. I think that should suffice for explanation. Again, have any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out. And thanks again for watching.